So if we could put up the poll.
I'm just going to launch that now, so everyone should see that.
Okay. So what are you expecting from today? And you can basically pick anyone you like. You can pick as many as you like. And then we'll see, hopefully that will kind of, hold on, submit. Yes, I've done mine. So we kind of know what we want to be talking about.
Okay, so we've got 15 people voted so far.
Yeah.
Out of 28 people. So if we can get a bit more, we can.
Okie dokie.
Yeah, I think once
but
we get
it's quite interesting to as a question, because I mean you could expect 101 things, and you know, it's just a question of kind of yeah, of kind of focusing the mind, of, because I mean so much is up in the air at the moment with social housing, but at least it looks to me as if it's going in the right direction. So you know, what are we detecting so far?
Okay, I'm gonna. You can see the results now. So we've had 22 people voted, and the top reason why what people are expecting from today, is the first one with 68%, just to get an understanding of what the social housing white paper is. Right. So that is the first, and the second place is what Origin plan to do differently, at 41%. So yeah. So and if we want to use top three, so the third is a resident view about the social housing white paper. So it looks like a lot of people want to hear from you, Kirsten. So yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, that's ideal, because I'm going to do a bit of a report back from an event about this very subject that I attended back in December on Zoom. So oh well, that's absolutely perfect.
Okay.
Sounds as if oh, there you go.
Yeah. Can you all see the results? Or
yeah.
Okay, great. Okay then.
That's brilliant.
Okay, so I'll close that.
Interesting.
Now. Okay.
Okie dokie. So well, so can I have the next slide, please, Cherish? So let's see what's on the menu today. What we'll do is we'll start by asking, what is a white paper anyway? And why is this one so essential and so long overdue? And next, Alison Inman will spend approximately half an hour sort of taking us through what exactly the changes will look like on a dull Thursday. I mean, words are fine, but what do they actually mean to our everyday lives? Now, Alison knows, and after listening to her, hopefully we'll all know and be ready with our questions for her. We'll then take a 5-minute break. You know, people will be in need of a break at that point, to make a cup of tea, stretch our legs, go to the loo, whatever we want to do. And after the break, I'll report back, like I said, from this really interesting residents network conference I attended back in December, together with some super active residents from other housing associations around the country. And then it's the turn of Carol Carter and Carol Williams from the Origin management team to tell us how Origin plans to roll out the changes contained in the social housing white paper, and also what they are already doing, because some of the things are already kind of being implemented. And that's sure to throw up a load more questions. So we'll spend the remainder of the event quizzing our two Carols. So just type your questions in the chat box, and we'll try to get through as many of them as time allows, which is always an issue. However, what we will do is we'll save the chat when we close down the meeting eventually, and that way we can always come back and look at other questions that we haven't been able to deal with. So just put your questions in, and don't be too disappointed if yours isn't one of the ones that get asked, basically. So can I have the slide, the next slide, please? So, what is a government white paper and why do we need one? The government website says that white papers are policy documents produced by the government that set out their proposals for future legislation. White papers are a way the government can present policy preferences before it introduces legislation. Publishing a white paper tests public opinion on controversial policy issues and helps the government gauge its probable impact. So this is where we come in, obviously, testing our opinion. Could I have next slide, please? The reason we so badly need a social housing white paper to reform our social housing laws is that the housing landscape has changed out of all recognition since the 2008 financial crash, putting huge pressure on social housing. Renting is exploding, buying is collapsing, and there isn't enough social housing, or community homes, as I prefer to call them. This is not going to change anytime soon, if ever. So something's got to give. As you can see from these slides here, the social rent is staying pretty static, but the private renting is just ballooning. And of course, that then puts huge pressure on the social housing property, because a lot of those private renters actually ought to be in social housing, which they can't because there isn't enough of it, and so that's 22. So to provide an opportunity for us to understand what social housing white paper says, what it means for us as residents and for Origin as a whole, we at Spotlight thought it would be a good idea to hold this afternoon's resident-led event. Could I have next slide, please? The social housing white paper was published on Tuesday, the 17th of November last year, to be exact. It had been delayed since spring as the government tackled the COVID-19 crisis. Everything was delayed, let's face it. The white paper sets out the future regulation of the social housing sector, no less. It formalizes the government's response to the Grenfell Tower tragedy, including, we were told, measures to further empower tenants and boost the supply and quality of social housing with greater redress and better, more meaningful regulation of the sector. Could I have the next slide, please? The white paper outlines a new charter for residents of social housing with 7 headline promises. 1, to be safe in your home. 2, to know how your landlord is performing. 3, to have your complaints dealt with promptly and fairly. Can I have a next slide, please? To be treated with respect. To have your voice heard by your landlord. To have a good quality home and neighborhood to live in. To be supported to take your first step into ownership. Actually, when you read those 7, it's kind of a little shocking that they've had to issue a white paper to put those things on the agenda, those issues, because they should be just, you know, normal things. But, you know, at least it's happening. So let's be thankful for small mercies. In other words, it promises to involve residents fully in the management of their own homes. So can I have the next slide, please? It's so rare that we can say that there's some good news for social housing. Usually the only headlines we get are, there's not enough social housing, or a family of 4 forced to live in mold-covered basement flat. Now, both of those headlines are likely true, so it's good to see attempts being made to give social housing or community homes being given the same attention as every decent home should be given. And that was the last slide. So we can quit the slides now. And I'll now hand over to Alison Inman, who will explain what all this means for us. Now, Alison is a familiar face in social housing circles. He's a former president of the Chartered Institute of Housing and currently sits on the boards at Tenant Participation Advisory Service, TPAS, and the Housing Diversity Network, as well as 2 housing associations. Busy lady. She's a staunch believer in the importance of great resident involvement and is very much looking forward to getting her COVID vaccine. Have you had your COVID vaccine since I wrote you? You have? Oh, congratulations. Well done. Yes, I've had mine. So, you know, there we both are. Unassailable. Probably not, but anyway. So over to you, Alison.
Hey, hello everybody, and I really wish we were, I don't know, somewhere between my favourite bit of London is that bit between St Pancras and Euston, which is where Basil Jellicoe set up the St Pancras Housing Association in the 1920s. And I think if you do that walk between those 2 stations, you actually see the whole history of social housing and how really good social housing changes lives and allows people to, you know, provides a home from which people can lead the lives that they want to lead, and in an area of such what was such an unimaginable squalor if we were to go back 100 years, but now has some of the best homes in London. So I just I wish we were there. I wish I wasn't sitting in my dining room. I feel a bit like a comedian who needs to start the set by saying I'm a lot better live than I am on video. So it's not my, I don't know about you, it's been a bit of a difficult year, hasn't it? And I can't wait for the time that we can all sit in a room together and actually talk about things properly. But I think it's incredibly important to start off by saying that the fact that you're doing this, the fact that you've carried on doing really good resident engagement throughout the pandemic, the fact that you've got so many residents, you know, on Zoom who are willing to give up some time and come and talk about the white paper and what it means for you, means that the white paper for your organisation should not be anything to be scared of, but it's something to embrace and something to sort of build upon. I've not done any slides because I'm rubbish at slides, I'll be absolutely honest. I had a baby in 1993 and I never really learnt PowerPoint. I don't know, it just never sort of happened. So I'm just going to chat. If I'm getting boring or dull or whatever, just tell me to hurry up or something and that'll be fine. So, and the other reason I'm here today is because Carol Williams and I did some work together at a different housing association a couple of years ago, and I think once you get in Carol Williams's black book, then there's no escape. So she said, "Oh, you'll just come along and talk," and I went, "Yeah, of course I will, Carol." So she'll need to buy me wine. The other thing I noticed looking at what you were expecting, I printed this out and I didn't have my glasses on, and when you have a 5-minute break, I thought it says stretch, go to the bathroom and get drunk. And I thought, well, that's nice. You know, we all need to relax. Apparently it's get a drink of water, so never mind. So I'm a real advocate of social housing. I'm a real advocate of everyone having a decent place to call home. I don't think there's anything particularly magical about tenure. I've been a private tenant, I've been a council tenant, and I married well, and now I'm an owner occupier. And it's luck and chance and wherever you are in your life that determines where you live. And I don't think any of us change because of our tenure. I think we change because we've got a long-term decent home to live in with good neighbours where we feel safe. We've got a sense of community. And I think that's at the back of a lot of thinking around the white paper, that the government, the regulator, other people felt that wasn't the case for enough people. I don't know if any of you were involved in the round tables about 2 to 3 years ago. The housing minister at the time of Grenfell was Alex Sharma, and he did a really big exercise of going around talking to as many tenants as he could. And at TPAS we were involved in that process. And I think he was quite shocked by what he heard. And a lot of what he heard made its way into the Green Paper, which came out in August 2018, and then we've obviously had the wait for the White Paper towards the back end of last year. I was going to start with one of the questions on one of the homework questions I was set by Carol, which was what's not there. So what's not made it into the White Paper? And there's three things that at TPAS we're a bit disappointed. The first thing is, despite what they say, there's really nothing in there about supply. And we all know that the thing that makes the biggest difference is actually having enough accommodation to house the people who need to be housed. And at CIH, we would say we need the right homes in the right places at the right price. And at the moment, we're nowhere near that. So we end up rationing. I'm sure if everyone of Origin's tenants walked away tomorrow, I mean, Carol would have a bit of a problem getting all the voids done at once, but you would have absolutely no shortage of would-be residents to move in. We've got a massive shortage of social housing. There's not really anything about supply. There's nothing about a national tenant's voice, and that was something that came out really strongly around the roadshow, was that landlords have a really strong national voice, but tenants don't. And at TPAS, we were really supportive of an independent resident-run organisation to speak for tenants. At TPAS, we want to be the voice of tenants and residents working together, which is very different to what an independent voice for tenants. So we were disappointed that wasn't there. The other thing that we were a bit shocked to have nothing about was stigma. And there was, it was a number one thing at the roadshow, was the amount of stigma that people living in social housing are often subjected to. And we actually felt that the last part of the White Paper that talks about this right to shared ownership and everybody being given a chance to get even a 1% foot on the property ladder, as if somehow that makes you one step closer to heaven, in the words of the song, or somehow that you're a better person if you're an owner occupier, than that you'll look after your community better if you're an owner occupier. And we all know that that's absolute rubbish. But it's almost like they couldn't resist just sticking that bit in about home ownership. So they're the three things that we were disappointed not to see there. But having said that, our response is very positive. As Kirsten said, though, there's some stuff in there that I often find when people go on and on about what the values of their organisation are, that they say, our value is respect, and you think, you don't have to write that on the side of your van to know that treating people with respect is the thing that you ought to be doing, just like basic, decent, human behaviour. And some of these are like this, to actually say, we're going to enshrine in legislation your right to be treated with respect. It's a bit of a pity that they've had to actually say that, and that lots of residents don't feel it. But if we go through them one at a time, the first one, and we're only having these conversations shamefully as a result of Grenfell, and it's I think collectively as a nation we should hang our heads in shame that we had to wait for 72 people to die before we were having this national conversation about the role and purpose of social housing. And chapter 1, the first thing in what they're calling the charter for social housing residents, the first thing is to be safe in your home. That's number one, and it's absolutely right that it should be number one. So the regulator You know, their consumer regulation objectives will explicitly include safety. Social landlords will have to have a nominated person responsible for complying with their health and safety requirements. There's going to be lots of new things going on, and they're very clear that the regulator of social housing and the new building safety regulator will be very, very close. There will be open communication at all times between those two people. There'll be consultation on mandatory smoke and carbon monoxide alarms in social housing. There'll be a consultation on electrical safety, and there'll be the development of statutory and good practice guidance on engaging residents in all tenures on safety issues. And I think it's quite often where, you know, that's why people get involved with their landlord often, I think, is because they've felt that they aren't safe. They've felt that something isn't right about where they live. And I don't know as a sector how clear we've always been with residents. I think there's an awful lot of gobbledygook. You know, if you sit in a meeting full of people who are, you know, whose job it is to make sure that electrical safety, asbestos testing, you know, Legionella testing, all the rest of the stuff that we need to get right, I find it quite hard to understand what they're saying. So, you know, we're going to have to think really clearly about how we communicate and what information our residents want. And I think residents need to be encouraged to be brave enough to say, I don't understand what you're on about, Carol. Honestly, Carol Williams, stop it. Gobbledygook, plain English, please. So that's the first one. I think it's absolutely right that should be the first thing. So just move all right, my notes here are not playing. Let's do the next one. Number 2. Right, the next thing is to know how well your landlord is performing. And that includes information on repairs, on complaints, on safety, and to know how it spends its money so that you as residents can hold your landlord to account. And again, the devil is often in the detail, isn't it? So the regulator is going to bring in a set of tenant satisfaction measures for all landlords on the things that matter to tenants. And I think we've all seen instances where if someone's really good at something, then they'll shout about it. And the stuff that maybe they're not so good at, some landlords are often reluctant to share. It's often quite difficult to do proper comparisons with other landlords. And what the regulator wants to happen is for, you know, as involved residents at origin, you can sit down, you can be really clear what you're doing, what your organisation's doing well, what services you're getting that are great, but also I'm trying to think what other landlords are near you. So there'll be some stuff that you do loads better than Camden Council, for instance, but there'll be some things that Camden Council do an awful lot better than you. And residents need to be able to make those comparisons in order to hold landlords to account. There'll be a new access to information scheme, which is I don't know how that's going to work, but it's along the lines of freedom of information. I come from a local authority world where that's just taken as read, that everybody's got the right to ask all sorts of questions. And I think there's going to be some patching up from housing associations there, but I don't think that good, well-run housing associations like Origin have got anything to hide. Why, you know, what don't you want people to know? So I don't think that's a challenge to good landlords. Landlords need to give a clear breakdown of spending. We shouldn't, as landlords, we shouldn't be spending anything that we're ashamed about anyway. So again, that shouldn't be a problem to good landlords. Landlords need to identify a senior person who's responsible for ensuring that they comply with the consumer standards. So for those of you who've been around a while and involved for a while, this is teaching your grandma to suck eggs. but for those of you who are newer, up until Grant Shapps, the Housing Minister, and his bonfire of the red tape, bonfire of the Quangos, I think it was it, Carol? We had the Tenant Services Authority, the TSA. I don't know if you remember the TSA and the pink bus and all sorts of things. And we had the 6 standards for housing associations and to meet. And they all had a sort of, what's that word? Not an equality. They all mattered. Grant Shapps came along and said, well, actually, we're going to get rid of the TSA. We're going to bring in the social housing regulator, and they're only really bothered about the money. They're bothered about the money and the governance, the viability, but they're not going to actively look at how well you're meeting the consumer standards. Okay. And that's going to change. So the consumer standards about your right to, around neighbourhood, about rents, about how your home's managed, that's going to be as important to the regulator as how your board's doing and how they're managing the money and risk. And a really, really good piece of news, I think, for residents is that the regulator appointed a new director of consumer regulation just earlier in January. And it's a woman called Kate Dodsworth, who at the moment is Chief Executive of Gateway Housing Association in Mile End. But it is it's a statement of intent because Kate is absolutely committed and quite a very, very strong advocate of high standards. And I think she will be a friend to residents and a very fair consumer regulator. And landlords are going to have to report on these issues at least every year. But it does say, interestingly, if not continuously, using technology. And lockdown's demonstrated that we can still do really good scrutiny. We can still do good resident engagement this way. I mean, and actually at TPAS, we're finding that so many more residents can be involved. If you don't have to turn up in the office in London at 4 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon to be part of a scrutiny panel, for instance, actually you can do scrutiny from the comfort of your living room. You can still be involved from home. So I think it's shown us that we can do that. We can use technology more smartly, but we still need those opportunities to meet together. I think otherwise, I don't know about you, I'll go slightly bonkers, although that ship might have sailed already. Right, how are we doing? How long have I been going? I'm looking for the time.
No, it's fine. Yes, absolutely. You're good.
Are we doing all right?
Yeah.
Okay. Tenants are going to have the right to know the landlord is performing. Transparency and accountability will be king. And we need to make sure that we focus on what's important and get that right. Comparisons are really helpful, but they're not the whole point. So what we at TPAS wouldn't want to see is that the role of tenants in actually producing some of these reports, so really good annual report to tenants are co-produced by residents themselves. That's, and we would hate for the legislation to sort of get in the way of that. So we hope that there's still going to be the opportunity for tenants to be involved in that sort of co-production. There's got to be some stuff that we've known, interesting stuff around things like chief executive pay. Sorry, Carol, they always pick on the chief execs, don't they? Sometimes as a sector, we look like we're shooting ourselves in the foot, I think, when we, go to government cap in hand saying how little money we've got, and then you see something, in the Daily Mail that says somebody's on, you know, just had a £50,000 pay rise or whatever. I think those days are over. But I think the government's really clear that they want transparency around pay conditions and whatever. Number 3 is interesting. So chapter 3 is around having your complaints dealt with promptly and fairly. And here we have not just the white paper, we've got a housing ombudsman in Richard Blakeway, who is acting in a way I think that we've not seen a housing ombudsman act before. He's very, very upfront and out there, and is producing league tables. And there was something in Inside Housing just this morning where he was naming and shaming a local authority because a tenant had been without heating for 3 years. And it made very, very uncomfortable reading. And that this line of communication is going to be open between the regulator and the ombudsman. And I think to some extent in the past, they've been pretty discreet sort of areas, but they are going to be talking to each other a lot. They're going to remove something called the democratic filter, which means no more wait to have to go to the ombudsman. So there will be a lot more residents going straight to the ombudsman. They will have the powers to take stronger action. There's going to be an awareness campaign for social housing residents about the ombudsman. And they're going to be issuing frequent reports. A lot of this transparency is already in hand, and the white paper is just talking about formalising it. But at TPAS, we're really supportive of the changes that the Ombudsman has made, and particularly the desire to become more accountable to tenants and residents. And actually, there's just recently the Ombudsman has been advertising for tenants to join his residents panel. And he wants to be having that direct. There's nothing to say that, you know, we shouldn't be getting on with this now. I think lots of organisations are looking at the complaints. There's so much data in complaints. I think, you know, what we find at TPAS is that most people who become actively involved in their landlord, do so on the back of something having gone wrong. And actually, that's where we do learning as organisations, trying to fob people off doesn't work, and it's certainly not going to hold water from now on. And I think if you've got a scrutiny group or really involved residents panel, actually looking at complaints is a really good place to start. You can anonymise them, but look at the trends of stuff that's coming into the organisation, and actually think, you know, there's organisations using a sort of problem solving approach rather than how can we get this person to go away. What's actually, how could we have prevented this problem in the first place? What can we learn? What would we do if we didn't have any of our policies and procedures? Are we really happy that this is the response that we gave? And our residents are the experts of living in our communities, so they should be front and centre looking at complaints. The next one is to be treated with respect, and that's talking about reviewing the consumer standards, introducing a code of practice, proactive regulation by the regulator, removing something called the serious detriment test, which used to say that the regulator would only be interested in consumer problems if they were really, really serious and at the top end. So I'm just going to swig my coffee. And there's going to be stronger enforcement powers. There's going to be a review of what we call the right to manage guidance, a specific role for the regulator on safety and transparency, I can't even say it, and an advisory committee to support the regulator in doing this. Welcome news, we think. at TPAS, we welcome that. Proactive consumer regulation is what we need. There's a lot to do, but we're it's building confidence, and we're really pleased that local authority tenants will be covered, but there's a lot of challenges for people still living in local authority accommodation, because the white paper will mean more changes for people in council housing than in housing association housing. How are we doing? Number 5, to have your voice heard by your landlord. One of the things that I was going to use a rude word, but Carol had probably shouted me if I did that, so I won't. One of the things that I find perplexing is that after the changes in 2011, so many landlords stopped doing any resident engagement at all, even though we still had a regulation that said, you know, that around engagement and empowerment, and boards were signing off every year to say that they were doing that stuff. Actually, TPAS has been inundated since November with people saying, basically saying, how do we do resident involvement? So either, I don't know, were they lying when they said they were already doing it, or what? But the fact that, you know, you've got a really, really good structure at Origin, you've got different variety of ways for people to be involved. You're not going to be running to catch up in the way that some organisations are going to have to. The big change, though, I think, with this part is that it's very clear that residents have got the right to be engaged in the way they want to be engaged, rather than residents being told by landlords, well, these are the 3 things that we do, and you can take, you know, you can either do them or not. So there's going to have to be, I think, a lot of thought going into what's appropriate, what do people want, what does the resource support, and having a sort of menu. So some places it will still be tenants and residents organisations, in other places it's far more digital. There might be sort of special interest groups. So if you are running a lot of sheltered schemes, then, you know, you might have a forum for you know, people using those services. If you're working with young people, you might have a different way of doing it. But it is about building up a menu whereby people can have meaningful relationship with their landlord. There's going to be ongoing ministerial engagement. So I think, you know, government are going to be listening, and they're going to be doing that checking piece to make sure that this is real. There's going to be a new, does anyone remember Tenant Central from a few years ago? There was a sort of training initiative that the ministry paid for. And they're going to bring back something like that. So there's going to be hopefully free training and support available for residents to help them to be able to hold their landlord to account. It talks a lot about holding your landlord to account, which can sound a bit sort of grim and not very friendly. The way we always say at TPAS is engagement's about doing 3 things. I should have started with this. The only point for doing engagement is either improving services, saving money, and I think tenants and landlords have got a shared interest in wanting to, you know, wanting to save money, and also to help strengthen communities. So if you have those 3 things in the back of your mind when you're looking at what sort of engagement opportunities you might want to receive or provide, and make sure you're ticking one of those boxes, I think that's helpful. They want to review professional training and development for staff, and there's a real push towards the professionalisation of housing staff, with things going things going, you know, they're fashionable or not, aren't they, at any time? And I think people like, you know, I keep looking at you, Carol, because I can see you on my screen, but, you know, people who did the Institute of Housing, 15 exams over 3 years, you never forget that. And then that sort of went out of fashion a little bit, but looking at professional qualifications for people working within housing associations, but also looking at the training that residents might need in order to be able to be most effective at what they do. So we are hopeful that that's not just about customer service. Customer service is really important, but we think there's all sorts of other stuff that's important as well. There's something about landlords helping with mental health, and that's great and welcome, but at TPAS we would say landlords have got a really strong role there, but we're not the health service. And I think sometimes housing is left to pick up things that other agencies who were actually set up to deal with them no longer have the money to do. So just a slight word of caution there. Oh, right, we're doing well. Got 4 minutes and I'm nearly at the end. So number 6 is to have a good quality home and neighbourhood to live in, which is what we all want. And flipping out this last, you know, this last year, it's shown outside space is really, really important, isn't it? Not having noisy neighbours, you know, I think is really, really important. Just being able to get out, being able to get to, you know, get to the shop, get somewhere for the kids to play, all that sort of stuff has become more and more important. People who are working from home and homeschooling, you know, when we do our new developments in the future, I really hope that we're all thinking, okay, if there was another, you know, another lockdown, where would the kids do? You know, I know people where the, you know, mum is sitting on the bed with her kids and one's trying to work and the 2 kids are, you know, trying to do homeschooling and there's not enough broadband, and it's, you know, so some real questions about that. And I hope that landlords are already talking to their residents about, to get some real-time data. What's it been like? If we could have changed one thing for you during lockdown, what would it have been? If there's one, you know, what one thing would have made your life a bit easier? What would it have been? And I think that would be really interesting. Antisocial behaviour, you know, we've seen, I don't know about Origin, but lots and lots of landlords have seen a massive increase in reported ASB. There's been nowhere to go, is there? Nowhere to go to just go and think, I'm going to get out of here for the day. I'm going to go and calm down. I just need to get away. Again, it'd be interesting to see how much of that's around noise, how much is about kids not having anywhere to play, how much of that's around, I don't know about you, but just things like we've created loads more rubbish because we've been at home for a year. I mean, the amount of rubbish we put out for the bin men, you know, it's 3 times as much as it was. Well, actually, if you've just got one bin store for 8 flats, then, you know, that's the kind of thing where arguments and bad feeling can come from. You know, the people who are breaking lockdown when you haven't seen your grandkids for 6 months. I think we're a nation that likes to see other people obey the rules. You don't mind doing anything really, but if you see the bloke next door who's having a party, then you just start to think, well, bugger that, you know, I'm gonna, you know, why should I sit here on my own or whatever? So it's going to be more and more important. Something very close to my heart. Up until now, all landlords have had to have a policy on antisocial behaviour. It's part of the regulation, but from now on you will also have to have a policy on domestic abuse. And if we think ASB has gone through the roof, then that's as nothing compared to domestic abuse. We've seen some absolutely horrendous things during the last year. And in fact, there was one, I think it was the third week of the first lockdown, when 10 women and children lost their lives to domestic abuse. So, you know, landlords are going to have to, you know, step up on that, which is great. There's going to be a review of the Decent Homes Standard. Anyone remember Decent Homes from all those years ago? You know, the ministry is going to look at what that means. Green and open spaces around new homes going to be more and more important. They're going to be looking again at allocations, but allocations are a very blunt instrument to deal with the problem of supply. So any allocation policy, it gets harsher and it gets more difficult to access housing when there's less, you know, when there's less of it. Which is why we would have hoped to have something around social housing supply running alongside it. The last bit is around shared ownership, but I reckon I've gone on for long enough, and that's the bit I don't like. So I'm not going to talk about that because, you know, it's Thursday afternoon and we've all been listening for long enough. If you're, it's something that's very important to the government. Is it realistic? I think it is. I think there's some really decent stuff here that residents can get hold of and landlords can get hold of, and working together, we can actually make things better. I think it means us being willing to wash our dirty washing in public. I think one criticism I would make sometimes of landlords is that we're a lot better at saying, hey, look at this shiny new development, isn't it lovely and gorgeous and brilliant? And less good at saying, we acknowledge that some of our stock is really, really old and difficult to manage and needs an amount of investment that we haven't got. I think we're going to have a much more realistic, paint a more realistic picture of the entirety. I remember one chief exec saying to me once that if you get a new build property from his association, it's a 10 out of 10, it's life-changing, they are magnificent. If you get one of the very old council properties that came over at transfer, the worst of those is probably a 3 out of 10. And actually it's you know, and it's just a question of chance as to where you are on the list, where you are on choice-based lettings, as to which one you get. So I think we're going to have to be a bit more honest about that. But I think where you've got really good structures to start with, there are not many organisations that would have two of their two highest, more or less, members, you know, paid members of staff sitting on a Zoom call with residents on a Thursday afternoon talking about the white paper. That's normally pushed down to people much lower down the organisation. So I think as a statement of intent from Origin, it looks really, really positive. And get on with it now, we would say at TPAS. Decide what's important to you. Talk about, you know, how you can engage as many people as possible. Go for it, and I really look forward to coming back in a year when I can get the train, I can come to St Pancras, I can wander around, I can look at those beautiful things on the, what do you call them, roundels on the, I always walk past those on the washing lines.
Finials.
The right.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And we can sit and we can have a cup of tea together, and you can enjoy each other's company, and you can show us what you've been doing, and that'll be brilliant.
Well, we'd love to have you back anytime, Alison. So
I've gone over by 4 minutes, which for me
that's
is not
absolutely
bad.
Fine. That's, you know, it's you know, it seemed like only too short. Everything you said was just very, not just interesting, but also very encouraging in many ways. I agree with you on several aspects, that there's still this thing of why do they have to tell us that we have to be treated with respect? Well, yeah. I mean, that's kind of just normal. But that actually goes in, I've got a whole sort of campaign running all by myself, which is that I think there's a lot in the language which is still like from the 17th century, all this business about landlords and tenants, and I want to call them housing providers and residents, and I constantly do that. I never refer to landlords and tenants if I can help it, because I actually think that there's a lot in the language that puts that sort of hierarchy, and the same thing you say about, you know, owners, owner occupiers and renters. Well, we better get real about that, because renters are going to be outnumbering owner occupiers if they aren't already. So there's a lot in this white paper which obviously needs to be addressed. I mean, questions. Let's see, where should we start? There's some interesting questions that have come in.
I don't know if I can help, Kirsten. The first question that's outstanding is from Leah, and it's about there's a limit to how many people can be involved in boards, and what about
that
the
was
rest
the
of
one
us?
I was going to pick
Wonderful,
out.
thank you.
Yeah, basically there is a limit on how many people, Leah asks, that can be involved in boards. What about the rest of the residents and their voices?
So I think it's about, as I say, having a sort of menu of opportunities. So I don't know about, not everybody wants to be involved all the time. I would tend to get involved with things. Actually, I was thinking about it earlier. It's two things that make you get in touch with someone. I think often it's when something's been so brilliant that you want to say that was brilliant, or it's so bad that you want to complain and you want to help make it better. And that's what sort of pulls people in. I mean, there's a limit of, you know, who can be actually on your board, but I think the ways of doing things like Zoom, having special interest groups, means that we've got the opportunity and there's a right for people to be involved. That's what this the white paper is saying, that you have the right to be involved. It's a charter for you as Origin residents. So to some extent, that's their problem, if that makes sense. It's about creating those opportunities. But once those opportunities have been created, it's not expecting people to live in your pocket for life. You know, people have got busy lives. People want to be involved in the things that they're interested in when they're interested in. They don't want to, flipping out, you don't want to do it full time, or else you'd expect to be paid. You know, I think sometimes, I don't know, we have this expectation that people will have no other interest than their landlord. And I don't know about you, but I like other things as well. So I think it's saying, starting that dialogue now. What are the opportunities that are already available? What are the areas of interest, passion, expertise? How can you map those? What else do you need? And there's no blueprint. So actually, sometimes it's about talking to people in another association or another council about how they're involved, learning from them. And the thing that I think could be really exciting is, so where's the majority of your stock? Is it London, Hertfordshire? I don't know. Tell me somewhere you've got lots of stock.
London and Hertfordshire, Alison, yeah. I'd say were the key areas, yeah.
Right, so in Hertfordshire, you've got a chunk of stock, but then so have other landlords. Now, there's a real opportunity for the residents of 3 or 4 different landlords to get together and say, oh, you know, we have brilliant repairs, what about you? Or, oh, actually, we're you know, it's really difficult, our customer service, they never answer the phone, what about you? And actually do some comparisons with each other. And I think that would really, really drive improvement. You need to have a really confident landlord for that. There are some landlords who'd run 100 miles from that because, oh, we don't want our residents talking to other people. But I think there could be something quite exciting to come out of that.
Actually, yeah, okay, that brings me on to, there's another question here from Jane. If the three things that you spoke about earlier, that Alison spoke about earlier, as missing from the white paper, and they certainly seem among the most important issues, what can we collectively do to keep them front of mind or absolutely carried over as items to be included in the next housing review?
So I think there's some interesting work around stigma going on. There's a campaign called, is it See the Person?
Oh yeah, yes.
And they've done some really good stuff around how people talk about. I once spent this awful afternoon, I would not recommend it, trawling through the Daily Mail website, just putting in social housing and council housing into the search engine and seeing what came out, and it was pretty gross. So, you know, you never read that a murderer is a homeowner when you read a court report, but you almost invariably, if they live in social, you know, if somebody does something terrible and they live in social housing, that will be part of the description of them. And it's about getting the stories out there that just show that people are people. You know, you're not defined by your tenure. You know, as I said at the beginning, I was as irritating when I lived in private rented and council houses when I was, you know, you are what you are. You don't change as a result of your tenure. And I think it's about keeping really close to your councillors, to your local authority and to your members of parliament, that we are just, because quite often when the National Housing Federation talks to politicians, what we get told is, oh yeah, our local housing association is great and our tenants are great. It's all those other ones somehow, which is really, really weird. Talking about supply, so I think we need to be just hammering home all the time that, you know, we don't have enough accommodation. There was something in the chat about empty properties. I mean, that's the really crazy thing about this country. We have both street homelessness and people and empty properties, often private rented stuff that's sitting empty, or the number of people, particularly in London, who basically use property as a bank. You don't get 10% interest if you put your millions in the bank, but you do if you buy a flat and leave it empty. And I think we just need to be, you know, hammering away at that. Tenant's voice. I think it would really help if landlords began to ask for this, instead of tenants asking, or as well as tenants asking for it. That if we just had an organisation of residents who live in social housing who could talk to government the same way that housing associations can talk to government, then there would be a sort of equality. You know, we would be saying that both constituents are as important as each other and both have things of value to say.
Well, actually, there was Alan asked a question of, should there be a more formal role for tenants associations, basically.
Yeah, I think it's easier if you've got stock in a close geographical area to do that. I think we're seeing more residents associations than we were doing perhaps 5 years ago. A bit of a resurgence, and I think where it fits in your structure is open for, it's that discussion with your landlord. I think you need both. If you've got, you know, a group of residents on an estate who care enough about where they live, and care enough about the services that are provided to form a residents association and to keep that going, why on earth would a landlord not want to hear from them? You know, it would make no sense. I think what we've lost and we've lost forever is the way probably that in, you know, 20, 30 years ago, the chair of the residents association automatically sat on the, you know, what in those days would probably have been a management committee of the organisation. I think that the changes to governance have broken that link, but any good board would want to know what its residents association is thinking. What, you know, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you?
But it is
so
quite hard. Sorry, Alison.
I was going to say, I think that link will be less formal, but just as important.
I think one of the problems that I can imagine housing associations having is that it's quite difficult when you talk about engagement and engaging residents, that it's really hard to engage residents these days because they've become so cynical, quite rightly, over the years, that they've never been listened to. I mean, look at what happened at Grenfell. I mean, it's utterly tragic of how those people were repeatedly ignored. And I think, I mean, we're finding that at Origin, you know, we put on events, you put on things, we ask people's opinions in surveys and scrutiny and what have you. And you get like the tip of the iceberg. You get perhaps 20 people being interested out of everyone. And I think that is going to be a real struggle. So what is the best way of getting people reignited and re-energized, do you think?
I think there's stuff we can do digitally. You know, for some people, the involvement that they want is to be, you know, after they've had a repair, they want to be able to say, you know, by text or whatever, you can probably do that, you know, tell us about your repair. What would you give it out of 10? What's one thing we could have done better? You know, whatever. So that's really important. I'm a great believer in going to where people are. We used to have a woman work for TPAS called Kate Newbolt, who was an absolute force of nature, and she was doing some work in Peterborough, and she spent 3 weeks stood outside the co-op on an estate. You know, engagement that you could imagine. But people have busy lives. People are, you know, particularly nowadays where, you know, it feels like, you know, like with the gig economy and people, you know, imagine if you're a carer and you've still got your mum who's not very well and you've got the kids and you're working these, you know, loads of shifts, you know, you're not necessarily going to be able to go to lots of meetings, but you've got some real insight about what it's like to live in an Origin home and what would make your life easier. And I think we have to make it easier for people, and, you know, having engagement staff who are, you know, who will go out and sit, you know, go to a sheltered scheme. I'm sure they do that. You know, you go to a sheltered scheme and you sit there and you just talk to people, and it's more of that, talking to people, sitting, you know, as I say, we just sit together and talk as people, and that's where it, you know, you get the really good insight.
Yeah, well, bring it on. I mean, that's been the problem, hasn't it? That I mean, apart from anything else, that we haven't been able to physically.
Yeah.
Actually, everyone, I just noticed that Cherish from the community development has put a link in the chat box if you want to a link to the so you can kind of feast yourself on the entire paper. But I think probably this is thank you so much, Alison. That's been absolutely fantastic. And I think we will have a break now. Everybody back, do we think?
Yeah, back and ready. Sorry about my camera, I'm having technical issues, but yeah, brilliant, Kirsten, really interesting. It's Jane here, by the way.
All right, yeah. Hi, Jane.
Hi, yeah, fantastic. My computer's not playing happy at the moment, but well done. It's really, really good, really interesting, and yeah, brilliant.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, I must admit, I'm finding it very. I do find it very encouraging, the fact that we're even having this conversation, and that it is a resident-led. It is a residents event. You know, that I think, let's take it from there. But it does mean that we all have to engage. We can't just sit back. We've got to sit forward and get busy. So anyway, so we'll start the second half of this afternoon by you know, me reporting back from a really useful residents housing conference last December. It was hosted by the Housing Quality Network and attended by resident representatives from a number of housing associations up and down the country. And I have to say, it was a bit of an eye-opener for me. And so, yes, thank you for the slide. The Housing Quality Network, or the HQN, basically provides advice, support and training to housing associations and councils and other housing providers. The event was recorded, actually, and can be accessed on a link that we can put in the chat box, I think. And also, we'll also put it up on the Origin Residents Facebook page. Don't forget to sign up to that. That's a really useful page. It's just called Origin Residents. And we'll put it up there as well, because it's worth just skipping through that event to see lots of ideas and good discussion. So watch the video if you want to be totally up to date with what's happening in the social housing sector, and also for some great ideas about how we can, or what we can do to engage more with our housing association. But in the meantime, here are the main points that I took away from the conference. Could I have the second slide, please? One of the most important points in the white paper, which Alison also mentioned, is the formation of the Housing Ombudsman Service, or the strengthening of it, really, which residents can contact directly if their complaint falls on deaf ears at their housing association. The Housing Ombudsman Service reported to the conference on their ongoing activities. Their role is solely to improve lives and housing services, crucially using complaints rather than just what anyone claims, be they housing associations or residents. They will actually take the complaint and base their work on that. Now, also, the landlords must be members, and the service considers itself to be there to provide a new deal for social housing. The experience is that the most common complaint is delays in landlords engaging with residents, which I'm sure that's something that you may, or some of you at least, may identify with. Although, funnily enough, with Origin, it seems to be a mixed picture. It seems that some people experience delays and others don't, and so on and so forth, which I think is why it's so good that the HOS service will kind of standardize that now. They'll just take the complaint and look at that in isolation, which I think is a very good thing. Since September 2020, landlords are expected to comply with the HOS complaint procedure, and the HOS have new powers to implement their complaint handling code. And also, crucially, the code has only 2 or 3 stages and requires responses within 10 or 20 working days. It depends on which stage you are at. From memory, one of the stages requires a response within 10 days and the other one within 20 days, which obviously means that in the 20 days, they will be able to kind of investigate what's going on. Alison has already covered much of how the HOS worked with complaints, but my impression was that they really do mean business, and that landlords have to comply with the Housing Ombudsman Service and their requirements. They basically want to promote a culture of learning from complaints rather than just kind of, you know, dealing with them and then forgetting all about it. And that should make everything so much more straightforward for both landlords and tenants, or housing providers and residents, as there will be fewer disagreements about how complaints should be handled. The tragic Grenfell disaster, which we spoke about earlier in 2017, has certainly been an extremely overdue wake-up call for the social housing sector. I mean, allegations that Grenfell residents have been ignored routinely when flagging up repeatedly inadequate or non-existent fire safety provisions were widely reported at the time, which is just shocking. Could I have the next slide, please? So, following the Grenfell fire, the National Housing Federation, which is the trade body for housing associations, created a charter which they called Together with Tenants, which you will have heard about because Origin have already implemented that as well. It was guided by a tenant advisory panel, and the charter aims to ensure that tenants have a stronger collective voice, which was what Alison was advertising for earlier. So that's all good. Could I have a next slide, please? What interested me most of all at the conference was how resident representatives from early adopter housing associations explained how their working relations with their respective housing associations had already changed in the wake of the social housing white paper. Actually, some had already operated in a genuinely collaborative way before the white paper came about. One Cornwall Housing Association, for instance, had replaced a resident scrutiny committee of 12 members with a permanent customer experience panel of 60, which, you know, is almost like a mini government. This proved more reflective of all the different demographics of residents. And all the meetings are held online, as are their more accessible board meetings. Board papers are also available to read on their website. Meanwhile, Manchester Housing Association has developed what they call a customer voice strategy, which involves co-creation, which is a sort of buzzword, isn't it, co-creation, and equal partnership with residents in management decisions, including budgets, which is a pretty comprehensive partnership there. Could I have next slide, please? Several talked about seeking genuine feedback from residents about services, not just tick box exercises.
Kirsten, sorry, am I on the right slide?
No, I think you you jumped.
That's the right one, isn't
it?
it?
Yeah.
Okay,
that's the one. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, several talked about seeking genuine feedback from residents about services, not just a tick box exercise, which seems to be more common. One housing association has removed the demographic filter for complaints to avoid any potential bias in complaint handling. And of course, residents can always contact the Housing Ombudsman Service directly if they continue to be unhappy. One speaker from the Housing Quality Network itself pointed to the fact that one size does not fit all, and that services should be individual and personalized. And I mean, they were talking about how there's huge value in building a trusted relationship, and that housing associations need to ask residents how they want them to engage. And I think this was another thing that Alison also touched on. You know, each individual have different ways for how they want to actually interact with their housing provider. So now it's the next slide. One large London-based housing association puts residents firmly at the heart of everything and makes all their meetings super accessible for everyone, whatever their level of understanding or their language skills. For instance, instead of just showing PowerPoint presentations, they use a service called morethanminutes.co.uk, to provide visual minutes where graphic artists draw the entire meeting as it goes on. I've been to some of those meetings and I love that. I love these. They are so clever, those people who do these drawings. And of course it can be understood by everybody, and it really just kind of breaks the ice of the meeting and puts it on a different level of kind of collaboration, which is brilliant. There are other services as well. This was just one that this particular housing association uses. Could I have the next slide, please? So through personalized communication, the same housing association has also surveyed all their residents about how best to access their homes, for instance, for fire safety checks. And, you know, what do they want to do? Do they want people to just turn up, or, you know, do they want somebody to be there with them, or whatever? And they strive to build relationships with every resident and offer flexible appointments, including evenings and weekends, which I think is really important. One representative spoke of a trial of a service procedure. This is interesting, where if a repair is going to be less than £100, the resident is able to pick a contractor and organise and pay for the repair themselves. And the cost is then reimbursed by the housing association without undue delay, which is, it's a great idea, but obviously it needs a few checks and balances to avoid overuse. I can see some people suddenly having like 7 repairs a week. I'm probably being unkind. Could I have the next slide, please? One housing solicitor, who is also a housing association board member, was actually quite thoughtful about how some housing associations treat their residents. And her advice was something like, don't patronize residents. They don't have to wear a suit. We need a complete culture change. Where they live is their home. And a new approach to resident engagement and service delivery is sorely needed. Also on that subject, One Housing Association published a guide, which you mentioned earlier actually, and was also mentioned in the chat, tackling stigma in social housing, called It's Not Okay. They invited other housing associations to join them, and they were staggered when only 7 housing associations signed up, and that's not okay. So that obviously needs some work. The general consensus seemed to be that residents know more about their housing association than anyone, and should therefore be involved in making decisions at board level for the benefit of residents as well as for the housing association itself. A so-called parity of arms culture should prevail, rather than landlords having hundreds of staff to deal with complaints and residents having no help at all when launching a complaint. It is a little bit of a David and Goliath sort of situation. Now, the housing, the white paper is potentially a great new start, provided it's backed by a robust regulator, which it is, with the teeth to enforce it. So the last slide, please. So in conclusion, I think the most useful bit of advice I took away from the day was to use the mum test. Ask yourself, would you be happy for this service to be offered to your mum? Ask yourself that question, and the vast majority of problems would be solved at a stroke. Thank you very much. I'll leave it there for now. But do watch the video on YouTube for loads more interesting ideas and discussion. But you see what I mean? It really was a very interesting day. So now what's next? What is Origin's plan of action? What are they doing already? What will be different? Questions. For some answers, it's over to Carol Carter, Chief Executive Officer, first, I think, and then Carol Williams, Director of Operation of Origin Housing. And there'll be plenty of opportunity for questions after they've both spoken. So put your questions in the chat box, please. Over to you, Carol.
Thank you very much, Kirsten. Thank you. Thanks so much to everybody for coming along to this event. We really, really appreciate it. I think it's about a year since we had our first open house event to roll out our resident engagement strategy at Eversholt Street. Seems a long, long time ago now. So we're doing this in the spirit of being open and transparent. We really want to hear from you and engage with you, talk to you about our plans, our progress, and get your feedback. So, you know, this is the first of many. You don't need to share the screen yet. Can you just take that off for a sec? I can share the screen. Don't worry. Thank you for the help. So I'm going to be doing a very concise sort of look back in terms of what we've been focusing on, the results that we've seen, and then looking ahead around some of the challenges that we're grappling with and our plans for the future. And I have to say that our new corporate plan was put together before the white paper was published, but I'm very pleased to say that it very much reflects and echoes the themes in the white paper, and I hope you can see that as we run through it. We have still got to then develop the implementation plans, the action plans for that, and the teams are working on that right now. So I'm sure you'll have lots of questions, so I will be as concise as possible so there's enough time for you to ask those questions, but I'm also very, very happy to have further sessions to explore all of these topics further. And then once I've done my presentation, Carol will then talk about our resident engagement strategy and where we've got to with that. So I'm just going to share my screen now. Okay, lovely, thank you. And can you all still hear me?
Yep.
Great, okay, good. Okay, so can you see the slide headed Our Strategy? Because I can't see any of you now.
Yeah, we can see, yeah, we can see our strategy.
Okay, thank you. So this is a look back, because this is the strategy we've been working to over the last couple of years. We had two key goals: safe, decent, affordable homes and good quality, easy to access landlord services. And to achieve those, we worked on 4 key areas. So that was making sure we continued to be financially strong, so that we could continue to invest and maintain properties and provide services. We wanted to make sure we had good information about our housing stock so we could spend money in the right way. We invested in our leadership and the skills that we need to make sure we're successful. And we began to invest in technology, and particularly making sure that our systems work well together. And we also recognise that we wanted to continue to build new homes, invest in communities and provide support to people who are vulnerable, and we've continued to do that. So in terms of where the progress that we've made so far, this is very much an overview. I think the first thing to note is that we've been spending a lot on fire safety to meet new fire safety standards. Some of you will know there's new legislation coming along the track, and we're trying to anticipate that as much as possible. So we've actually spent £20 million over the last 4 years, including this year, meeting those standards. And at the same time, we've continued to try to find resources to continue to invest in maintaining the standards of our home. So you can see the breakdown that we've provided there. And then for affordability, we are continuing to build new homes. So this year, there'll be 329 new homes handed over, the most of which will be affordable, a mixture of social rent and shared ownership. And then we've got around 700 in the pipeline, and even more of those will be affordable. And at the same time, we've continued to make sure that people can afford to live in our homes. So we carry out assessments for new lettings. We continue to provide income support and advice. And we also have a tenancy sustainment service, so offering support for people who are in crisis. And then on landlord services, we have created a new repair service offer, which we've had residents involved in shaping. And one key feature of that is that we're offering more people the opportunity to get their repair done on the day they report it. And so far that's going well, and we're hoping to improve the percentage as time goes on. We've done a lot of work to improve service charge accuracy as well, to make sure that people are billed correctly for the services they receive. Over the last year, we've invested in digital services. Some of these are in their infancy, but we're seeing a really good take-up, particularly around social media, which is now fully integrated with our customer system to make sure we can track any issues that are raised and make sure they're resolved. We have continued to invest in support services, and that has included reaching out to vulnerable residents through wellbeing calls. And as I mentioned, we've launched our new resident engagement strategy as well. And we've done a fair bit this year to try to engage people as much as possible. And clearly, a lot of that has been through digital channels. And then at the same time, particularly with the challenges of COVID, we've wanted to make sure that people were looked after as much as possible. So I'm really pleased that we've been able to continue to provide our supported housing services. We have been in contact with a large number of older and vulnerable residents, and we've provided either direct support or we've signposted people to services that they need. And I'm very aware that we haven't been able to reach everybody, but we have made significant attempts to contact people. And then we've clearly had a lot of new people going on to benefits because they've lost their jobs during this period. So we've done our best to make sure that we're in contact with people who are newly onto benefits and making sure they get access to everything that they're entitled to. And specifically, we've offered tenancy support to nearly 190 residents who were really struggling. And then I know there's a little bit of scepticism around this in terms of the data, but our independent customer surveys show that we're not there yet in terms of wanting to provide a service that everybody values. We're very aware that we've got a way to go here, but I think you'll see just from this overview that we have managed to improve levels of satisfaction across most of the indicators. Some have stayed stubbornly stable, but we're working very hard to improve them. So, and I absolutely accept it's not just about the figures, it's not just about these statistics. It's really important to listen to residents and what they're saying. And we take great note of what is said if people need to complain to us in the verbatim feedback that they give us when we carry out these surveys. And also we go out and we talk to people on estates, and we go and talk to residents, and we hear from them and how it is for them and the impact it's having. One thing I will say is that it's absolutely true to say that we're still on this journey in terms of improving services, but I do also speak to a lot of residents who really appreciate their home and feel that the services that they get are good value. But I'm also aware that we need to do that more consistently, and our communication needs to be a lot better. So thinking about looking ahead and plans for the future, there are quite a few challenges that we have to grapple with. One of them, inevitably, is that we're moving into a very deep economic recession as a result of the pandemic and partly as a result of the impact of Brexit, and that will inevitably impact on our income, but also our costs as well. So in our planning, we have to be as prudent as possible to make sure that we've got sufficient funds to continue investing in homes and in services. And one major area of challenge is in terms of meeting fire safety standards. So we've done a huge amount to make sure that we've got access to the right technical skills. So we know exactly what needs to happen in our properties. We've been investing, as you can see, for quite some time. And we've got a reasonable idea of what we'll need to spend in the future. And effectively, it means we've probably got to double the investment we're currently making in our stock. That's a huge amount of resource to find. So it means that we've got to be even more efficient, and we've got to make really well-informed decisions about where that money goes. And then at the same time, we have a rising number of people who are vulnerable and at risk. And Alison referred to the fact that there's more antisocial behaviour as well, and this really is an issue for residents in terms of quality of life. So we want to make sure we're working with you, with the wider community, and with the police and our other agencies to address this. And we're also acutely aware that you all want faster services, you want them to be more efficient, more responsive to you, more personalised to you. This is the sort of service that we experience in our day-to-day life, and it's a sort of service that we want to provide you. And then of course we've got the green agenda coming up, so we need to achieve carbon zero, and therefore there's a requirement for us to do that in terms of our new homes, but also invest in existing stock as well. And the benefit of that will be warmer homes, more affordable homes, as well as a positive impact on the planet. But we do have to find the resource for that and make sure that we're investing in the right technology. So a bit of an overview about what our residents are telling us, and we really do listen to what residents are saying, and I think what we need to demonstrate to you, outside of these sort of set piece events and resident engagement arrangements that we put in place, we need you to feel that when you contact us, we are really listening and we're understanding what you're telling us, and we're making sure we're focusing our efforts on resolving the issues for you as quickly as possible. So, we know from the feedback we get that you want it to be easier to get what you need. You don't want to have to manage us. You want us to coordinate, so we provide you with that efficient service. You want repairs done right first time as much as possible. And if that can't be done, you want to be kept informed. You want to know that we're listening and to feel that we're fully responding to your concerns and priorities. We also know from your feedback that feeling safe and secure in your homes is really, really important. And I think we've seen that sentiment be even more prevalent in the feedback we're getting. And we've started to measure that as well, and to see, how many of you do feel that way. And we've made some progress, but we've got a way to go. We also know that you want us to be more visible to you and for us to be more connected, particularly in terms of what's happening in your neighbourhood, on your estate, in your block. If you have cause to complain, then you want us to resolve it as quickly as possible. And I think many people recognise that, they may not be vulnerable themselves or at risk, but, there probably are people living around you that are, and you want to make sure that those people get the support they need. And as Alison said, we can't necessarily provide all that support, but we want to make sure we're working with other partners to offer that. And then increasingly, with the shortage of affordable housing, we know that many of you have changing housing needs and you want us to help you. And that really is a challenge in terms of the supply of affordable housing. So these are some of the challenges and the context really for putting our plan together. So what I'm going to be doing now is just giving you the highlights. This isn't going to explain exactly how we're going to do that. And what we want to do is work with you and with our involved residents to really bring this to life and make sure that we get the impact that we're looking for. But one thing I think really is significant is that in 2024, when we've delivered this plan, Origin will have reached its 100th anniversary. And we're very cognizant of the fact that our founders had a vision of providing genuinely safe, decent, affordable homes in strong communities where people had opportunities to improve quality of life. And that's really where we want to make sure that we're having an impact. So this new plan has a renewed emphasis on what's most important to our residents and our local communities. So there are some underlying themes for this plan, and what I've asked the teams to do in thinking about how we bring this to life is to make sure that these themes really do come through in the practical steps that we're taking. And the first of these, and probably the most important, is we're on your side. So in focusing on what's most important to you, we want to work together with you, to get it right first time, every time, as far as we possibly can. And this is really about a partnership of equals. We want to build trust and confidence. And, the point that Kirsten made around the mum test, I think, that's a standard we want to achieve. We want to feel that, when you contact us, that we're listening to what you're saying and that we're working with you to resolve that issue, and you can trust in us to deliver. So for me, that's the most important theme of this new plan. We also recognise that lots and lots of small changes make a huge difference. So we want to make sure that we're trying out new ways of working, and that those new ways of working really are going to deliver sort of tangible improvements. So, things that you notice every day in the services that you receive, and that you feel that it creates more efficiency, so we get more right first time. We want to use the information that we have, so information that you give us, information about your homes, financial information, and we want to use that more intelligently to inform the decisions that we make and to be really transparent about that. And we want to build on the work we've already done, working in partnership with others, and making sure that we're leveraging in the resources that are out there. So, you know, we know that there's huge resource amongst our residents and within the community, and we want to work with you to make sure that we are making the best use, really, of that huge resource that's out there. And for example, you know, we know that many of you volunteer and you help your neighbours, so that's something we really want to encourage and celebrate. So these are our main ambitions in terms of services. So we want to make sure the services that we're providing really make your life easier. You know, that's what everybody wants. We all have challenging lives. We have lots to juggle with, and particularly post-COVID, even more so. So, you know, this is a real ambition for us. And we want you to feel proud of the homes that you live in and the communities that you live in. We want to work with you to achieve that. And we want to make sure that our workforce, our people in the organisation are engaged, they've got the right skills, they're working productively, and we reflect the communities we work in as well. Because by having the right people, we've got the best chance to provide you with the right services. So just sort of unpacking that a bit more. So thinking about services that make your lives easier. I've talked about wanting a partnership approach with you. This is really, really important. Genuinely want this to happen. And this is about open and honest communication. We want our staff to be more visible and more connected to you. So we need to make sure we're freeing them up to do that. We want to make sure that we're providing that one-to-one support for people who need it. We want to be really clear about the service offer that you can expect when you contact us. So that's the best way to make sure that you're happy with what you're getting, because you know what you're going to get in the first place. We want to do more work on our digital services, and it's not for everybody, but we know there's quite an appetite out there to want to access our services 24/7 and to be able to self-serve. So we want to make that available to as many people as possible, so that we can then free up resource to support those who need it. We know we've got a lot to do in improving complaints handling and learning lessons. So this is an area of real focus right now, because when something goes wrong, you know, you really do want it fixed for once and for all, and you want us to do it quickly. And then we also recognise that we need to be more joined up. So when you're experiencing issues, challenges in your block, in your neighbourhood, on your estate, we want to make sure we're all working together within the organisation, engaging with you and supporting you better, and listening to the solutions that you have, because, you know, as Alison said, you're the experts. We are going to be looking at our repair service. We're due to bring in a new service in 2022. So this is a huge opportunity for us to involve you in what that new repair service looks like, and make sure that it's flexible, it's reliable, and it offers you more choice. And, you know, the background, I suppose, to making sure that things work as well as possible is getting these systems that we have in place to work, to talk to each other more effectively, and to make sure we've got good quality information. So they are a range of ways, practical ways, that we plan to make your life easier. And then thinking about the homes that you live in, as I've mentioned, we have a lot to do in terms of investing to meet best practice fire and building safety standards. We spent a lot already. We want to make sure we're doing that wisely, and we want your involvement in that. But it does really present us with a challenge, and I want to be completely honest and open with you. And what that means is we've got to make quite difficult choices about how we invest the resources that we have available to us. So we do want to invest in communal areas in the public realm to create, you know, safer spaces, attractive shared spaces. But there will be, you know, there's quite a lot of contention, there's quite a lot of demand, if you like, for the resources that are available. So we want to make sure that the limited resources that are available are used wisely. And similarly, we need to continue to upgrade homes as well. So things like kitchens, bathrooms, windows, boilers, all those things we need to continue to do. But it really, really is a challenge. I've talked about partnership. That's really important, because that's our best way of making sure we're spreading our resources as well as we possibly can. And then we need to meet that challenge around environmental standards and make better use of the information that we have available on our housing. And then for our people, as I've said before, we want to make sure that we're both bringing in but also retaining the best people. And I think we've made quite significant steps to do that. I'm not saying we've got it completely right yet, but I think we've got a really good staff team. They're really, really committed. They want to do a good job, and we need to help them to do that good job and provide the sort of services that you deserve. And then the last slide is just an overview of that new plan, and we will be sharing the slides with you after this, so that if you want to come back to us with any specific questions, then you're very welcome to do that. So I'll just stop sharing for a moment. Now, I know I've cantered through that really, really quickly, and it's quite a lot to take in. Haven't had a chance to look at the chat, but I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions that we can come to. But if I can hand over to Carol now to talk about resident engagement.
Yeah, thank you. Cherish, do you want to put on the slides so that we don't have to give me access to them? I just wanted to pick up a little bit around what we actually are doing on resident engagement at the minute, and how, you know, how can we move that forward. And I promised that I didn't have any idea of what Alison was going to say whenever she started her presentation. So hopefully you'll see some sort of things coming through in flavours that Alison was also talking about. And I think, again, it's just, we need to sit back and reflect, you know, well, what is it that we actually do at the minute? And as Carol has said, and, you know, it totally is where we both come from, is that we believe the best way that we can, you know, make sure that the services we deliver are hitting exactly what our customers need, what the experiences our residents want, their expectations, is we have to understand and we have to listen. So as part of that drive in 2020, so, you know, last year we launched our Together strategy, and we were one of the first people to work with the NHF and look at that Together strategy. And we've used 3 pillars, if you like, for that. Thanks, Cherish. And those 3 pillars are around involvement and scrutiny, around investing in our communities, what can we do there, and then about how can we and our residents together try new ways and learn from others. So this is this whole piece of Alison saying about, you know, wouldn't it be great if 2 or 3 housing associations that worked in the same area, you know, shared ideas and views and learning from each other. And, you know, we put this in our strategy last year when we launched it. So, you know, I think, you know, we've got a great platform here, and it now is about us doing it together. One of the questions that came up earlier was about governance and that links and how everything works. And again, Origin is a step ahead, I think, in a lot of organisations, that we have a specialist customer services committee. And, you know, we have a member on the services committee who is a resident. And what we, you know, do is we link our spotlight chair with that customer services committee. And it's not just about that chair speaking with them, but it's about the Customer Services Committee understanding what's coming from all residents. So they specialise in looking at our performance. They specialise in interrogating our complaints and what we're learning from our complaints. They will constantly challenge us around what our services are delivering and what our customers are telling us about that. So, you know, we are well placed in that governance structure of having this Customer Services Committee. And what we're also doing is, you know, reviewing all the time, how can we strengthen that and how can we make that more involved with our residents. And I think, again, it was also mentioned earlier that we do have a resident board member as well. And I understand that that's just one person amongst, you know, all our tenants and residents, but there's so many ways for voices to be heard so that we can get that through to our governance structure, through to our committee, through to our boards. It's not just about having someone sitting on that committee. If we move on to the next slide, please. So what do we do already? So we have lots of routes of engagement. And I think someone put in about doing surveys and things are not the only way to do it. And I totally agree, it's not. And we've got to have different menus. And by no way are we having, you know, do we have all the answers here? But there's got to be other ways that we can be engaging with you all. But we do things like our open house doing this evening, finding different ways like that to engage. We have what's called Neighbourhood Explorer. Now, every year we go out onto some of our estates. We probably do 3 or 4 a year, and this year we've carried on doing them. What we've had to do, instead of going onto the estates and knocking on doors, we've actually done it by phone calls to residents in those areas. But those are really, really insightful times for us, because we're talking to people in their homes on the phone, asking them what's working well, what isn't working well, and really getting to understand the services that we're providing and the experiences that you're all receiving with those services. And as Carol said, you know, we hear some great things and some really good experiences that people have had, and then we hear some really bad ones, and we've got to bring that consistency back into everything that we're doing. We want to do joint estate inspections. We think it's really important to walk around the estates with our residents. We did stop these during this year. We did try to do one, and being honest with you, we tried one in the summer, and unfortunately, people wouldn't keep their distance, keep the social distancing, which was still in place. So we haven't been able to do these the way we would want to, but these are very high on our agenda to get back in as soon as we can safely. And linked into one of the key areas of the white paper around safety, we have what's called Building Safer Futures. And this is where we look at a building and we do a safety case on it. And to do that safety case, we are completely involved with the residents. It is led with the residents in mind. And we have to do communication strategies on that. We have to continue to communicate with residents. And that, again, is a really great way for us to understand how we're performing and what's happening. So some really good routes in for us to get lots of information and lots of listening that we can do. We also have ways of, you know, reviewing formally, if you like, and designing our services and getting customer input. And we use our spotlight panel. Obviously, Kirsten's here tonight from that. Scrutiny, task and finish groups. Again, complaints is our next one. We've just been advertising for people to come onto that scrutiny group to do a review of our complaints process. And, you know, it's really key that people come forward and help us with that. Picking up what Alison was talking about earlier and the changes that the Ombudsman has brought in, we have reviewed our policy. We've brought in now a 2-stage policy process to make it speedier for residents. You know, we're working really closely with the Ombudsman if they decide to, you know, to come to us with cases. So it, you know, we're learning all the time on that. But I think there's a lot more we could learn. Hence why it is one of the key ones that the residents put forward for us to put as one of our next scrutiny reviews. So if anybody's interested, please come forward to Tosin or Cherish, because they'd welcome your input into this. We do have tenants associations and residents associations, so formal organisations which we work with, and I personally meet with the Camden Residents Association every quarter. So you know, we're really keen to develop that and involve those. And also we just have focus groups that might look at special interest items, or we might do surveys. We do lots of consultation on policies. You know, policies are really key. You know, people will ask us, what is our antisocial behaviour policy? And we want to review that, taking residents' input. We do have a domestic abuse policy. We have policies on, you know, pets and lots of things that are really key to what people are interested in. And we want people to help us with those when we review those. And Cherish, if we can go on. Those are sort of like the formal ways that we can get information back from yourselves and how we can listen, but actually there's lots of other ways, and those include every time you contact us, you're giving us information and feedback. We've got our complaints, we can learn lessons from those all the time. We're really, really pleased to see that so many of you have taken the opportunity to report health and safety issues to us using the online portal. The number of people using that is absolutely brilliant, and we're so, so pleased that you're able to do that for us, and that really is helpful to help us understand how we're managing our services. We do surveys immediately after some services, and these can be by text or through other means. But we are doing it around repairs. So when you have a repair completed, we do send out a survey straight away. If you've had an antisocial behaviour case, we will send out a survey, lettings, etc. So we don't want to do too many surveys, but I do think that getting feedback immediately after you've received a service is really important for us to understand how the service went, how you felt about it, did it meet your expectations, what could we have done differently, or what could we have done better. So those are really important to us, and we're looking at improving those and making sure we can use it by text, and we all get used to getting text through from online delivery services and stuff like that. So I think there's lots of ways we can involve that ourselves. And then we have our annual resident perception survey, so you will all be contacted by Quest once a year on a rolling programme to answer some questions, and some of you will and some of you won't participate in that, but again, it's a really good opportunity just once a year for you to give us some feedback on how we're doing. And so I think the final thing for me is then how you can move on, Cherish, sorry, is how can we do more? What more can we do? And in presenting this slide, I'm presenting it in the spirit of, we need to talk to you about what more we can do. These are just some ideas being floated at the minute on it. So picking up a little bit more about getting closer to the group of residents, our block, an estate, a neighbourhood, it doesn't matter what size that is, and actually developing together plans that reflect what's needed in that particular area or community. So we want to do more of that. I think there's probably means of doing more service improvement groups, looking at things maybe like our website or our portal. We've just developed our new portal. A number of you helped us to do that. A number of you tested it out for us. But obviously we want to develop that further. And I'm sure there's lots of you out there who'd be able to share with us your expertise in that and what's good and what's not. So, again, we want people to come forward. I just put down here about networking groups, and I just raised disability, BAME and LGBT+. But again, that could be just back to sharing information with other housing association tenants and landlords in your area. Again, the campaign for It's Not Okay on Stigma. And I think there's much more we probably can do through empowering residents through training and support to remove barriers to how you can participate with us. And actually, again, Alison raised it, and I think Carol raised it as well, around making sure that our staff are trained and are working with us on meaningful resident engagement across all the services. That's really key to get that informal feedback at all times. But I say this is just a starter for 10 that I'm throwing out there. I want to build this. I want to get that menu, as Alison called it, by working with you to develop it, not being driven by me. So I'm going to stop there, and I think we can probably open it up for questions.
Well, thank you very, very much. Gosh, talk about information overload. But all incredibly interesting and hugely relevant. Actually, I tell you what, if I may start with a question of my own. One thing I hear a lot from residents is when you have a general issue that has to do with some kind of undefined thing that isn't a tap that's leaking or whatever, what tends to happen is that it sort of disappears into the sort of bowels of the offices or something. You contact somebody, they get back to you, yes, I'll keep you posted. A month later, nothing's happened. So you get back to them. A month later, nothing's happened. This goes on and on and on. What is the route through this? I mean, one sort of recurring theme for this conference I went to was the idea that top management is the same as all the staff coming down from them. So that actually whatever happened down here is the responsible of individual top managers. So is there, like, if I contact one of the general staff and I get no joy at all, time after time, who do I email? What do I do? Do I email you, Carol Williams, or you, Carol Carter, or what?
I would say that if somebody wasn't getting a response to a query that they were raising, or were waiting for something to happen and it wasn't happening, then I absolutely think that is through our formal complaints process. And I think that is the right route for people to take that and to report to us. Obviously, people can escalate to the line manager and work that through. But what I don't want is residents waiting and waiting and waiting. And I think we want to learn, and I think we will learn from whatever way you contact us. But if it really is like that, then I think people should use that formal process. And we should be brave about that and accept that. But we will work with people all the time, whatever means they want to communicate, whether it's through that line management route or through that formal route.
So it's not, one shouldn't contact the customer services committee or anything. And where is that formal complaints procedure set out?
It's on the website under the residents pages. So okay. It's, as I said, and it's a very straightforward process of just coming through to our customer resolution team.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. I've just noticed actually that Tosin has put a link on the chat to find out more about getting involved through scrutiny. So take a look at that. And Leah asks about complaints. What about out of hours?
So with our out of hours service, we have a company called Pinnacle who take our out of hours service calls. And they deal with those for us. Now, if a resident, and I know this happens because I've had calls and other people have had calls, if a resident doesn't feel they're getting the answer in the out of hours, we have an escalation process, and people are quite at liberty to say, I want to escalate this to a manager. And my staff and myself do get calls on sometimes occasions for that. So it's very similar to in hours. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think Lilia's asked us, where is the Pinnacle contact details? So I'll just check, but I'm sure they're on the website, but I will check, Leah, that for you.
It's the same number. It's the same number.
It's the same number. It's just, you ring us and it goes through to Pinnacle, doesn't it?
Okay. And there's another question here from Samantha Katoon. What housing support are available for young people aged between 18 and 24 who've been in the local authority care system?
So we have in Camden, we have a scheme which is specifically there to support young people coming out of care. And this scheme offers obviously self-contained accommodation, some sharing accommodation, and we have support workers on site. So what we're doing is supporting that person to start to live on their own, and probably people will start off in shared and then may move into one of the self-contained units. And at the same time, we're supporting them with benefits if they need to, or we're supporting with help to get a job, or just generally their mental well-being and welfare. So we have support staff, on site 24/7 in the scheme as well. So it's a really, really successful scheme, and we're working in partnership with Camden on this.
And how would they find out about this?
Well, it comes through.
Who would they
the
ring?
The local authority know who the care leavers are, who's coming through their system as care leavers. So they will work with us on any vacancies that we have. So the young people who are coming through that process will be linked with the local authority already.
Right. Okay. Great. Thank you. And just the last question, I think, will have to be, because we're running over time now and everybody's getting hungry. Question from Jane. There used to be a great newsletter. Hold on. How will Origin update residents to how they are improving engagement, repairs, complaints, etc.? There used to be a great newsletter issued to all residents, which sadly ceased. Any plans to create electronically?
Do you want to say anything, Carol, on the newsletter?
I don't know which.
Yeah, I know that for some people that's been important. I think what we try to do is to make sure that we're sending out information through a variety of routes. So, for example, we're using the website, but we're also using email and text more frequently now. And I appreciate that doesn't suit everybody. So even if you don't use the website, you can still hear from us. So, for example, the regular updates that we've given during the pandemic have been through email primarily, and that's had a good response. I mean, we know that because when we've done the executive Q&As, we've had something like 200 questions in that time. So people are obviously seeing that. We do use notice boards as well. We also provide information in rent statements that we think will be useful to people. And we're actually just piloting digital notice boards as well, which obviously would be quite costly to roll out, but over time we hope to do that so that we can then keep people up to date, in their block. So I think we're trying to use a variety of channels. I think the issue with the newsletter, apart from the expense of producing, is usually by the time people get it, it's quite out of date. It's hard to know what people actually want to hear about. So we'd prefer more sort of interactive ways of keeping people informed. And I think for a lot of people, they just want to know about what's happening in their area or in their block. So for example, we've introduced something called group communications, which means that if, for example, a lift goes down or a door entry system goes down, we can contact everybody in the block who's got an email address or a mobile phone number and let them know that we're aware of it and that the engineer's on their way. So we're trying to do more of that sort of tailored communication about things that are most important to people in terms of their homes and services. Okay, but you're looking at how you can improve the... Well, I think we're doing that already. And Leah's question about could we use rent statements? Yes, we're doing that already. So in the quarterly rent statement, we do provide information that we think will be of use to people. Okay. So yeah, and obviously we're happy to consider other methods, but we are trying to use a range of different channels to provide information. Okay, great. All right then, well, that'll have to be it. We will be saving the chat, so if there's anything we've missed, I think we've actually covered most of the questions, but if there's anything we've missed, we can always come back to that after the meeting and get in touch with people directly. Thank you very much to Carol and Carol for answering our questions and for being so kind of open and frank with what they're up to, good, bad or indifferent. And thank you also to Alison for unpacking the white paper so expertly for us. Who said we don't need to listen to the experts? Yeah, well, anyway, so I think one thing to take away from this afternoon is that it clearly pays to be an active resident, as we can see from all the other housing associations that I quoted, where the residents are very active. I'm not just talking about the occasional nice gift card, which Origin sends us for our efforts on Spotlight and other groups, although I find them very gratifying. I mean that
it pays that any housing association clearly works so much better for everyone if everyone puts in a bit of effort. So thank you very much, everybody. I can't think that there's anything else that we really need to cover unless somebody, unless Tosin or Cherish or...
I was just going to say, can we quickly do the last poll just to get a bit of feedback? Just a quick click.
Oh yeah, we were going
Yes.
to do a poll.
Yeah, just
yes.
that. Yeah.
Yes, I must be getting hungry. You know, when I'm hungry, it does things like that. It affects my memory.
So.
Okay.
I've
yes.
just launched it, so just a quick click and
okay.
Then yeah.
So poll. Can everybody see the poll? Were your expectations met? Yes, partly met or not met. So there you are. Vote now. And yes, and another thing, we are, just to reiterate that we're looking for more residents to join us on the Spotlight panel, guys. So really, if you are at all interested, which you should be, it's your home after all, why not get stuck in? If you take a look, I think it's been put in the chat box. The link has been put in the chat box repeatedly, so have a look through it. And you know, deadline for applications is Monday the 1st of March at 12 noon. So please, you know, do something. And because apart from anything else, you know, we can all moan and groan, and that doesn't get us anywhere fast. So here we are. Oh, wonderful. 77% said that their expectations were met, partly met, 23% not met, 0%. So I think we can chalk that up as a success, and also, therefore, plan to hold more of these sessions. Perhaps we should do them 6 monthly or something like that. Would that be a good idea? I think so. So anyway, thank you all very much for sticking with it, and thank you to our contributors, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Kirsten. Bye.
Thank you, Kirsten. Really appreciate all your work for sharing this. It's been great. Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
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 Thanks, Cherish and Tosin, for organising the bits and doing the presentations.
Pleasure.